Hello and welcome to the Do Different Conversation series, where we get to hear from thought leaders who help us think differently, but more importantly, do differently. And today I'm joined by two incredible thought leaders who have been changing the landscape of the business conversation around creativity and innovation for over 3 decades. So welcome, David Pearl and Miha Pogacnik.
Hi.
Gentlemen, I am just so excited to have both of you here today because, again, the work that you've been doing throughout the years in terms of bringing the arts into business and teaching people how to tap into a different part of themselves, helping them elevate themselves. Well, I can't imagine a time in our lives where this kind of conversation, these kinds of skills, tools, inspiration is needed more than ever. I'd really love to just level set a little for the audience and have each of you share a little bit of the highlights of your careers over these last few years with this work. And then we could kind of dive in a little deeper to what you're doing now and how you're doing what we call corporate soul healing at this very important time. So David, I'd love to start with you if you'd like to kind of share with us some of your journey.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it short. But so my background is music and it's the arts. Started singing when I was a little boy at the Opera House at Covent Garden with people like Domingo and so on and so forth. And I thought I was probably headed for a life, purely in the arts. But artistic people find themselves drawn into other things as well, and lots of fingers and lots of pies. And mid-90s. There's a big sort of interest in the arts in business in this country, that's to say the UK. And I was merrily going along with my way when the phone went, and it was a big global company that wanted to have they put it this way, they wanted to find see if the arts could help them with problem solving, but also to see if they could get to know each other in ways they wouldn't have dreamed possible using the arts. So this sounded great to me because I was very interested in human development as well as the arts. And the result was this extraordinary 1,500 person opera, which they created with our help and performed. And it was really a 5-day process. And it was epoch making, really. It changed my life. It changed a lot of people's lives. And it really opened me up the possibilities of working, bringing the arts into business and fusing them. Many years later, that's what I've done in many different forms. And I have to, share some of the ways of doing that. But I think, as you so rightly say, it wouldn't call it a gift. It's don't want to be glib about COVID, but one of the interesting byproducts of this unusual situation we find ourselves in is that I think the businesses that I work with and others, are finding the need to, I think what they would probably call, they need to stress manage, they need to reboot, they need to find direction, they need to connect in different ways and know each other in ways they wouldn't have dreamed possible. These are not just nice to haves, they're really must haves for many businesses, particularly global businesses around the world. And Miha and I think that the arts definitely have a huge part to play in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And Miha, how about from your perspective, a little bit of, boy, I don't even know where you highlight. You've, so many different things you could talk about.
Well, first of all, I must say I'm so pleased to have conversation with two of you. Wonderful. David, my old friend, although you look very young, with all, such eloquent, such a poetic English, but behind that language there is source, which is wisdom and life experience. Oh, it's wonderful. So to your question, Mirjana, look, I'm a violinist, but I very soon recognized that just playing concerts is what everybody does, and people get excited and they are emotional, but then it's over. And I felt like this should be the starting point. So that's why in 80s I started exploring transfer. How can one be, as a violinist, really a factor of the social change? So when you begin, you don't know. When you begin something new, you don't know. So I was searching, experimenting. What was very helpful was when I had a very successful festival in France, in Chartres Cathedral. I actually motivated my audiences to start traveling with me across the world. So that was a new step. So art that goes to the crisis places, and then audiences come with you and they meet with the locals. And so that was going on for quite some time, a lot, 200 festivals and more. And then I discovered in 90s, suddenly we are heading for a very dangerous situation, namely turbo capitalism only. The only choice is one way. And then I, of course, felt like time for change, and I started working with business. And I'm still working with business and many other things.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'd love to kind of get an understanding from both of you of what you've seen now in these last few months since the global pandemic and, the shutdown. People, again, as we keep saying, are siloed in their homes more than ever, and are hurting in so many ways. David, how has your business changed because of that? Or even just take us back to what it felt like, experiencing some of this early on and trying to even figure out how you do your business differently through the global pandemic.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, funnily enough, the night before, well, the week before things locked down over here, Miha and I were doing a project together in London where using Beethoven, using the violin concerto, and talking about how art can give you a kind of red thread through enormous change. Little did we know what was coming our way. But gosh, it's been very interesting to me. Last year I did 500,000 miles of travel, and this year I've been to the kitchen and the garden and this room. And despite that, my work hasn't changed. Obviously, in those aspects notwithstanding, my work hasn't changed a great deal, because a lot of my work is about designing and leading high stakes, interesting, highly inventive meetings. Because over the years, I discovered that my background in theater was particularly applicable to the business meeting. I've written books about the art of meeting, which I know people, used to and still do complain about meetings, but the art of meeting, the art of being as we are now, the art of connecting mind, heart, thought, spirit is incredibly important key to innovation, to inventiveness, to solving problems. It's what humans have always done and always will want to do. So I think that we had to adjust, obviously, and there's been a little bit of clunkiness, with various platforms and Zoom, but I think the old imperatives are even stronger now, which is, how do I really make good use of my time? How can I connect with you and find out what's really going on with you? You're in the States, you're in Europe, and so on and so forth. So it's what I call it, developing the ability for leaders, particularly, to have intimacy at a distance. How do you reach through the screen? And of course, the arts know that really well. We have a thing called cinema, which is a screen-based thing, which is about exciting your heart, your mind and stuff. And so using techniques from broadcast and from cinema and from the theater are more useful now than ever. I think also, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I love your use of the word intimacy, and it really is something that I think has begun to resonate more in this platform,
Yeah, I would say it's a double-edged sword as well. I think clients that I speak to, at one level, it's made everyone more human and a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more open, because look at us, we're framed by our living accommodation. But for others, particularly in some of the large corporations, they're a little bit ambiguous about what feels like an intrusion into their private lives. And I think that there's a good question, which is, there's little space now between the professional mask, if you like, your professional persona. You get up, you brush your teeth, and suddenly you're there at the computer, and then you turn through 90 degrees and you're in your family. If you've got a family, you're your father, husband, mother, whatever. And I think people are struggling a little bit with that switch. Which mask do I need? Do I need a mask? What's authentic? And also the fatigue that comes. Miha and I come from the world of performance, and these demarcations are pretty clear. There's the platform, there's rehearsal, there's backstage, there's front stage. And for many years, I've been talking to businesses about, where's your backstage? Performers like Miha spend, he'll tell you, a fraction of the time actually playing the violin in front of an audience compared to the amount of time rehearsing, thinking, devising, working on his technique, practicing, and so on. And so I think that the need, in my view anyway, the need for particularly high performing or any business person, working person that seeks to perform at a high level, let's put it that way. I think it becomes clearer than ever that you cannot be on screen all the time. You have to develop your resources away from the screen, away from the Zoom camera or whatever it is, in order to be able to flourish and be able to work. And I think the arts has got, hundreds, thousands of years of suggestions about how to do that.
Yeah. And just one more question on that. You mentioned how it's difficult for people to kind of connect with which persona. Do you find that that's different culturally, between, let's say, Europe and the US? It might be different. Do you think in Europe there's a difference about it?
I mean, my perception, generalizations are all untrue, right? So I don't know, but I would say that the American ethos is put in the hours, and therefore the American firms that I work with, they definitely traditionally have spent time at the office. I think that is now under scrutiny because being busy and looking busy are not the same things, right? So they're discovering that just putting in the hours doesn't necessarily, A, is not sustainable, and B, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting the work done. So this is kind of forcing a consideration about that. In Europe, I think, it's a broad generalization. Now, I just will say that even though I'm in London, I still consider myself a European, right, in case anyone out there is listening. I think in Europe, there are many different, one of the beautiful things about Europe is it's got many different cultures. I spend quite a lot of time in Italy. We live in Italy for a bit of the year, and there, the 2-hour lunch, I'm glad to say, is still a thing. And I think they recognize, there are many cultures that recognize that conversation is work. And just spending time sitting, looking busy in the office is not necessarily the most productive use of time. So we'll talk about it, but the value of conversation, the flow, which means the flow of meaning, and the conversation is more and more important in these times that we're living through.
Yeah. And Miha, from your perspective, how have you seen your work change in these last few months, or, even where you found your own inspiration? And I know we've had a lot of conversations about this need for the corporate soul healing and the way you bring your work into it. How have these last few months been for you?
Well, you just said, David, you said flow of meaning. That was your last word. Beautiful. Yeah, that's what masterpieces of music are. They are flow of meaning. Once you enter that stream, and when you get out in the other end, you are full of meaning. It means you are suddenly perceiving meaning around you, because that's the problem, is perception. And now with this cutting down of the possibility to really meet in person, our perceptions are diminished even more. But I was, Mira, and I was surprised that actually so much comes across when I pick up violin and play online. So I was really surprised. So I said to myself, well, maybe this is going to be healing wounds that are all over right now. Maybe we can really touch people and establish what I always wish to do, what I call resonance platform, sort of pick up people through music to that place where they can immediately start open conversation full of meaning. You see, because music does elevate us into that sphere immediately, if we are willing to listen, really. And that is very valuable, because at every meeting, David is a master of composition of meetings. We know that. It's in the first place a case of ego. Me, and me, opinions, my opinion, and so on. So how do you do away with that for a moment? Even though opinions are very important, of course. But how do you do that away in order altogether to enter that magic resonance platform, and start from there? So this is why I am now actually exploring quite a lot, working online.
Well, what I think about your work that's so integral right now is that there are the two components. There's the artist within, and how we each have to tap into something more deeply, and you help people find their way through that. But there's also, as David was saying, this importance of the conversation. And then for both of you, with music, it's bringing the people together. It's like bringing that orchestra together. Everybody has their part. and they all elevate one another in different ways, which I think is so necessary in business. And sometimes we don't find it as easily, you know? So where to begin, Miha? How do you begin on this journey with your clients and finding the way to their resonance?
We are talking about simplicity. You know, the world of masterpiece is very complex. So question is, how do we find a entry point? And in my opinion, this entry point, which would be immediately transferable to the needs in the leadership and in organization, is to learn some particular inner condition, to learn, to practice. This condition, now it's going to sound very unusual to some people, and I will explain later with music as well, is to learn to ask the Parsifal question. Now, what does that mean? This is, of course, timeless literature. I'm talking about something, a masterpiece that has determined, you know, humanity in many ways and defined the Parsifal of Wolfram von Eschenbach, you know, medieval minstrel, troubadour. And it is about learning to ask question out of genuine compassion. But how can you possibly come into the genuine state of mind? There is a precondition for that, you see. You cannot say, now be genuine. That doesn't work. So how do you get to that? It gets only if you intensify your capability to perceive. The perception. If we don't perceive our fellow human being with real interest, so we see the qualities in these people, because we just see people. No. Everybody's absolutely unique. So when we start intensifying our capability to perceive differences and qualities, then we may be able to learn to ask this deep question of compassion. And why am I saying that? This is very important for organization, because once you ask people such a question and you really stand behind your question, then they open up and tell you all the problems they have. You know that you stand there for them, so they can reveal to you what is really their wounds, their problems, their fears, their whatever, and how much do we have of that right now through these conditions under which we are sort of forced to live. So this is what I would like today to come across, how to approach this possibility to ask the genuine question of compassion, and how can musical masterpiece help us on this journey.
David, what do you think about that in terms of this, this question of compassion? Do you feel that it's all been lip service throughout the years, and now has come the time where people are asking questions more deeply and, truly, wanting to hear the right answers, or, being open to the answers?
It's a great question. It's a big question. I would say, having been working with, senior people for the last, I don't know, two and a half decades, I think one thing that has become very obviously more okay is for senior people to not know, and to be open. You might call it vulnerable, but you might just say it's, the question, for example, of like mental health. In the past, it was like there was mentally healthy people, and then there was occasional stress. I think where we are now is a sense of like, we're all in the unknown. And that's okay. In fact, it's suspicious when people say, no, I've got this under control. And so I think the other thing that I notice as Miha's talking, and I think about our work, is some people feel that compassion, but don't necessarily call it that. So part of the job, I think, is a translation job. There are companies still that would run a mile if you start saying, well, you're talking about compassion. But if you talk about diversity and inclusion, or you talk about caring for your people, the softer, the motherhood language has crept into business over the last couple of decades. And so I think if you find the right word, you will find a lot of resonance in terms of what Miha's talking about. And I'd say finally, people seem to be more and more willing to ask the big questions because they need asking. Senior people, again, aren't expected to know the answer. No one really knows the answer in terms of where we head, but you better ask some good questions, I think.
Yeah. I think that's such a great point. And Miha, I wonder if the work that you're doing is helping people at every level find their voice. You know, they think that's what's so important. I mean, it's to be able to, every individual contributor, to be able to speak to a senior leader and ask questions of a senior leader and not be afraid. Do you find that part of your work is helping people find that strength from within?
Well, one of my techniques is to always throw the pyramid on the head. I say the pyramid, which is actually stands for genius at the top and just basic needs at the bottom. I say that genius striving for the impossible should be the bottom line, actually, and not something unreachable. So, and that's why we are trying always to do impossible things as an artist. And therefore, I do encourage question surfacing at all levels. Actually, right now, working with the companies online, I have sort of always suggestion to first do a session with the top leadership, and then we invite in a second step everybody, the whole company. That is usually not possible without online, but online you can talk to 10,000 actually. So it is really important that everybody in a company, to whatever degree possible, gets on the resonance platform, so that people start resonating between themselves. We know musicians, absolutely that is true, that if you resonate with somebody, like we three resonate when we talk, I mean, I can hear it, and then immediately you are on the other level, and you can do so many more things that otherwise you are restricted.
Do you, and before, and I know, Miha, we want to get to you playing and really taking us through some of this. I know we have a short amount of time today. You take half day programs and full day programs sometimes for all of this, but I wanted to just ask both of you, because you are musicians, is it about that language? You come together, even if you've never met, but as musicians, you kind of come together with an understanding and, I don't know, just this inner spirit that just opens up the conversation and dialogue in a different way that we don't experience in business without this kind of understanding and training.
I mean, maybe if I go first, it sparks two thoughts in my mind. One is that the arts have been around a long time, but they're not a traditional good way of getting rich. Some people do, but mostly we don't, right? So for generations, eons, musicians and artists have had to work together quickly. They had to find ways to get together and work quickly. So we have that kind of familiarity. And it's also because I think second point would be that we're serving in the broadest sense something bigger. So you have, you know, Miha and I were working on the Beethoven Fiddler Concerto, the Violin Concerto. You know, that is a towering work, and you can quickly get into working relationships because you're all trying to scale this mountain. And there's that, which is not always true in the business team. Sometimes they're getting together, but they don't really know. They know what the sales target is, but they don't necessarily understand what it means. So I'm talking to people a lot about using story and so on to become meaning makers. I think there's lots of information, but there's not so much meaning. And when people feel their work is meaningful, their lives are meaningful, of course it energizes them and causes them to connect with others who share that meaning. And I think, you know, you'll hear that there's a lot of meaning is encoded in these great works of art that we can all, nourishes us all, really.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you think about musicians coming together for a big masterpiece, as you said, they all have this purpose. They believe in the masterpiece. You believe in what that end product is. And I think that's what we're all talking about now, is if in the corporate world, people could truly understand the value, the purpose, the identity, how they identify with that greater purpose, maybe they could come to that brainstorming session already invested in a different way, as you both are when you're working on a masterpiece and working with musicians. And do you find that to be true, Miha?
Yes, you know, Mirjana, and it's not only about belief, because the wonderful thing vis-a-vis masterpiece, that the science and religion, they merge together. You know, belief belongs to the religious department, but science is inside. So we musicians, we cannot perform a masterpiece if we don't have let's say, fairly good insight into a structure and everything else, the genius, organic, meaningful, whole, totality. If you don't have that, then you just play. You know, many people play like that. But if you really have insight scientifically into totality, an organism, then when you play, you know exactly where you are in relationship to beginning and end and everything else around. And that gives a different kind of confidence to you as a performer. Yeah? But we'll go into that right now very soon when I show you just a little small masterpiece. But look, if I just begin, for instance, we talk about the question. Listen to that. The very first motive. But can you notice at least that is a question. Yeah, it's clear. You see, this is for me the entry to any masterpieces, to discover where the questions are. Where are the phrases that sort of sound like a question? And then I go from who is asking a question, how is it developing, and so on. But this one, if we take it again now, not only that it is a question, it's already good that you get that. But now, how is this motive formed? What are the inner gestures? Look, it starts like this. You see, there are three components. The one is rising, starting and rising out. And now, this is like eyes. Can you see? It's like eyes. They are looking somewhere. I call it eyes of the heart. Because the whole question is question of compassion. It evokes feelings. But it has also this kind of round, these spots, they are archetypal in the whole, when I play the whole piece now, you will always again and again hear these little round balls, sort of like eyes, like perception. I was talking before about only possible to ask this compassion question if you perceive the person. So you have to see with the heart. So seeing with the heart is unlocking the fellow human being and letting them be who they are. So now let me show how this motive starts. Are you interested to go now on, or do you have some question in between before I take off and run you through the whole thing?
No, I think, David, unless you have anything, I know you've seen Miha's work and you've worked with him. If there's anything else in terms of setting this for our audience, if you'd like to comment on.
Just one, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think one thing to, breathe, say something. The thing I'm really feeling is something I've been experiencing over the last few months, is that music has a way of creating that intimacy that we talked about before. So the sound of the violin coming through as Miha's talking connects you to your feelings as well. And again, this is another thing that's really important, I think, in the world of work, where traditionally, I think feelings, you start talking about your feelings and they'll send you to HR for a kind of lie down or something.
Thinking and doing, they say, thinking and doing,
exactly.
and this is gone. Yeah.
And also culturally, for global companies, you know, feelings don't always translate through whatever the business language is. So one of the beauties of the work that we do is it creeps under your rib cage into your heart without you realizing it. That's what I wanted to just say as we're beginning to hear Miha take us on this exploration.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Miha, please continue.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm doing this, I really want to state it again. It's not now to say, look how beautiful music and all that. I'm really trying to say, here we have a musical detour. We go on detour as together with leaders, with managers, with whoever, we go on detour in order to enter this world and learn from it. And out of experience, I can guarantee that after such a detour, so much is released in people. They suddenly can do things they could never imagine before. So that's why I'm doing this. Otherwise, we could just talk. Look, so we start here in the left corner. Once again, the first question. With these eyes here. Yeah. Yeah. Eyes, talking about eyes. Remember, maybe you've seen pictures, medieval churches, cathedrals, they have these frescoes of those all angelic beings. They are so seraphim, cherubim. You know how you recognize them? By having eyes everywhere, all over the body, on the wings, everywhere there are eyes. So what does that mean? Well, we have to develop those perceptions, we humans. Now, look, let's go now on. I start. You recognize the same pattern, except first one goes out and the second one goes now in. So that's the difference. This one goes. Yes? So the second one goes in. So when you ask people about their sorrow, you also have to ask yourself. We all are full of unresolved issues, aren't we? So it's one question that goes out and in. Once again. And what is released now? You notice, from the periphery comes the answer. Yeah, a lot, A lot is released. So this is the purpose. Question unlocks, and then we get from everywhere. The same. Do you see the eyes? Continue. And now, of course, it has to build on this. Now we are almost on next platform. We don't go back to the beginning. Now, what's the next step? Can we differentiate this from what was before? Yes, we have to differentiate. This is now. Question. Next one. Now come 3 questions, not 2, 3 out of this. First one says, so 3 times question. Did you notice out of what? Out of the same element, these eyes. Plus, the most important reason I'm so much into the minute is because to hear that it's organic. Now, look, it says. David, we talk so much about octave in the Beethoven concerto, which means it's not only asking now question out of next level, but actually saying, go for the highest. The octave is the resounding experience between ego and I'd say. So reaching for the highest potential. So it says 3 times, how do I get there? Well, who am I really? Yes? So what's next step? What kind of gesture is that? It's a door. It's a portal. You know, we talk about portal of birth, portal of death, but we go through many portals in life. So many life phases. You know, it's changing. We are now going to another quality, another level. So how does it go through? Eyes of the heart. New level. So is that clear? You see, this question triggers the possibility for people around you to come out with who they really are and what their problem is. And that brings us together with them to strive for the highest, and we find the gateway to go through. And now the next stage, next level starts unfolding. There are 3 levels in this masterpiece, like always in life. You know. So now the next level, it says again, again, in another tonality now. Now you are C major. We started F major. So we know that already, yeah? It's like beginning, but now at another level. Now, 5, it goes. Yeah, explosions. You see, I'm always saying, we human beings, we run our lives and businesses on 5% of what we are, and we are lucky if we do that. So this is what music can do, unleashes the other 95%, or at least 10 more. So now let's go. Notice, at the end there is again gateway. But what was in between? Explosion. It was like sun. Everywhere, you know, unbelievable here. So, let me play that once again. Before we get to the next gateway. And going through. So I start at a high point. Now, question. After we have gone through these two stages to the limit, one could say, what more can you pull out of the violin? Please tell me. You cannot do more. This is limit. What's now possible? Yes, now comes this very interesting fact that we can always practice in all situations in life, how to let go. You know, when you have all this extraordinary experience of life, at some point you let go of everything and ask yourself some of the most fundamental questions about human spirit. You see, and now what... Do you get it? After all this, now suddenly only one silver line. One line that is less and less and less and less, and then it disappears. Zero point. Here we are at this famous 0 point of life. I call at 49, at least, if not before, or maybe later, where you start practicing the most powerful leadership concept. I call it the power of productive resignation. The power of productive resignation, where you maybe discover that so much of your life up to now has been illusion. So, what is possible after this 0 point? That's the question. Suddenly it enters there and says, this is the question. And I'm going not to tell you what the question is. It is for you to find out. Every single human being must find their own real individual question. But this is almost the goal of the beginning of the masterpiece. Then it can be concluded. You see, now many of us don't get to this question before we die, and that's the problem. So how do we traverse this wonderful journey? So I would like that we talk about it, but let me quickly play it through, because we must redeem this. It's not nice to sort of cut apart music, but it's important so you can now suddenly be with the music objectively and not, enjoying it and liking it or something like that. That is side effect. Of course, you can enjoy it too. Now, let's go.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Miha. I think, as I was watching you and listening, I was thinking about conversations that I've had with people when I talk about your work. And David, I'd love your thoughts on this too, because, one of the questions that people bring up, and I know, Miha, you've heard this, people say, well, if I don't appreciate music in that way, or classical music, am I just going to be listening to someone play and okay, great, it'll be interesting, engaging, but how do I transfer that into my work? And at a very basic, simple level, for me, when I share, when I sit here, what I see, the passion with which you play, how you identify with the work that you are doing, your purpose, getting to that great masterpiece, working through it, I started to internalize that for myself. And even as I sit here this morning, I started to reflect on, wow, these next few hours of work or deliverables or things that I have to do for my own clients, I want to be filled with this joy, with this purpose, with this identity in the way in which that I see you perform it here. And I wonder, how do we express this to people? And there are probably deeper layers of this. And that's why also, David, I'd love your thoughts on this. One, you experience as work. Two, you do this kind of work as well. Three, you've probably been asked the same question by clients who say, I don't know if my people are really going to get it and get to what you're looking to do here. So how do we help share, sort of the fundamental aspect of what comes through something like this?
Well, I mean, Miha, you have to, about your own work, you'll know about how, you'd say more about how business people use this word to ground it in their daily reality. I mean, for me, I think experience, I mean, I'm known as an experience engineer, and which I quite like that idea, because I think experiences are by their nature transformative. When you've experienced something, that the point you feel, you said you feel that you'll do your emails slightly differently. I think that there is something that's going on inside when a masterpiece plays on you that sort of changes you. And a lot of my work has been not on the mountaintops, but on the in the foothills. I found myself working with organizations and trying very hard to work on what I call everyday magic, which is how do you not to think about the daily work as something that's different from what Miha's talking about, but it is full of what Miha's talking about. So how can you bring power and life actually into the small stuff, so-called small stuff, because that's where a lot of us live our lives, which is why I've spent a lot of time on the art of meeting, which is not people's favorite topic, right? But actually, as we're doing here, the flow of meaning is super important. It's the kind of the steam engine of the post-industrial revolution. It's where ideas come from, right? You go to, the big tech companies or the hedge funds, you don't see people with machines. Mostly you see people going blah, 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 yeah? Or now at the moment they're on Zoom. But how can you, I run a non-profit called Street Wisdom, which is a physical equivalent of what tries to do equivalent physical of what Miha was just doing, which was use the streets to enable people to kind of explore and wander and maybe get lost a bit and ask questions. Again, but that's, designed for the streets because a lot of us can't get to the mountaintop. I think what art does is it kind of gives you it lets you get to the mountaintop, which is why it's so incredibly valuable. What do you think, Miha?
Well, it's the opposite of GPS, the street wisdom. GPS, I'm so upset very often because only takes you the fastest way to the goal and you don't see anything in the process. so.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've written a book somewhere here, I've got a copy, called Wonderful. Sorry, this isn't product placement, but it's just right here. Well, it is in fact product placement, but it's what you learn when you allow yourself to get lost a little bit in life. And I think that's another thing that's happening at the moment in the COVID era is that there's been people feel a bit lost and we start asking questions, and probably some of them are really good questions. How many businesses have thought before this, remote working. Even the word remote working suggests that the work happens in the central place and everything else that happens is remote from work. But actually now people are going, well, hang on, what is work? Does it have to happen in a building? Maybe my home is part of the campus. Maybe the space between my home and work is also part of the campus. Maybe we'll be meeting near home, etc., etc. But it forces us in a, it's humbling, but it forces us to ask questions we haven't had time to answer for the last few years as we've been charging along.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and back to the beginning of this conversation, it is about those questions and being even the questions of compassion, you know, having and really wanting to hear the answers. I mean, how often in business we just kind of, you know, roll through conversations and asking the question, trying to get to an answer, but don't really stop to sort of unpack the deeper layers of what people are feeling and really trying to say. I think now, as you said, you know, David, that this is the time that we're kind of slowed down in some ways to really look deeper to that, to those
and
questions.
I think what Miha just gave us an example of is, you know, you could spend 20 minutes meditating, and that's great, or 20 minutes playing games or whatever it is. But there's something about spending 20 minutes with art in whatever form, but great art, that kind of doesn't feel like 20 minutes. It feels like, you know, a day full. And it restores you, and it isn't just time off. It's about, you know, Miha uses this phrase, growing new organs of awareness. I think that's part of that. The other thing I think that's interesting about what's happening at the moment is businesses are societies having to create new rituals, or in fact rediscover old rituals. Like essentially what we're doing now is we're gathering around the fountain in the village. We're having, you know, we're spending a bit of time talking, connecting it. Organizations are having to do that. I do story jams with people, but they can exchange stories. Turns out to be super effective. And to your point, I think, Mariana, there's something about the kind of the way these computers are set up that enables you to go from one thing to another, whereas music is in movements, and there are pauses in between, this space. You can still feel that space at the end of Miha. You can still feel, and what I think we're having to do is make space important, and breathing space. I've got another project I've been playing called The Green Room, which Miha has been involved with as well, which is in between the stage and front stage and backstage in performances, a room usually called a green room in a theater. And it's a place where usually artists go to sort of, it's a liminal space. It's between work and play, where you hang and you can reflect, and you can soak, and you can not know. And I think that's one thing that, you know, it's the effect of perhaps working with businesses is they begin to understand more that the empty space is a workspace. Just allowing yourself to not fill it, but to go within, to think, to hear, to listen, to drink, to wander is legitimate part, always was a legitimate part of creative work.
Yeah.
I must say something quickly on this, because you are bringing it to the point. The space that is most loaded and full is the boardroom. You step in and you know, as soon as these people are there who have their decisions to make, it's completely, what shall I say, beton everywhere. It's yeah, you cannot move anything anymore. It's a boardroom. And exactly the other side is necessary today for people in organizations. This open space, which I call inspiration center, where the rest of the human being, besides the left side of the brain, is nourished. The rest, everything else that is so important to be connected. So your green room or inspiration center, we will probably not live up to that date when every company will have inspiration space. That will be probably green. That's okay. Yeah, but thank you for mentioning this as a final point.
Yeah, and I know we want to be mindful of time, and I know you both have to go, but Miha, just on some final notes there, again, you always say that people don't have to know classical music, they don't have to have a true appreciation for it, but how would you kind of sort of encapsulate what you've done here for us and leave people with some thoughts about it?
Quite honestly telling you, Those who know a lot about classical music, they are problem listeners, because whatever I'm going to say, they will immediately have an inner objections. Because I do this as phenomenon, I don't do it as a musicology. Of course, it's also there, but I speak about phenomena. And I like people who have no idea of classical music, because, as you see, we go step by step. You need just to be intelligent, halfway at least. You know, that's all. It's just I'm educating attention, basically, to attend to certain lines that you hear, and I help with giving some, you know, meat and bones. Well, I'm vegetarian, but I help sort of get some content on it. So and some archetypal imagination to it and so on. But at the end, music is music. You cannot explain music. It's not possible. But you can guide the attention so you enter the process. You don't stay outside and you like it or hate it. You see, that's the problem, that we stay outside of the art because we only look at ourselves, how we react to it. Nobody's interest reaction. So what? You know, you stand in front of Kandinsky and you don't like it, and so Kandinsky couldn't care less if you don't like it. It's about daring the step into the painting. Dynamically, you go, you move with the forms, you go into the colors, relationships and all that, you know, let this work on you. And that's what I want in music, so that eyes of the heart open up. And I'll tell you, that is a real plus to have in life, because everybody notices if you have eyes in your heart. That is noticeable. There is something very special when you meet somebody who has eyes and ears in the heart. It's very special.
Absolutely. And David, I know we had talked early in the beginning about you may be playing for us. I don't know that you have time for it to kind of send us off on a special note, but if you do, we'd love to hear it.
Yes.
And also, or just to just recap, kind of, you know, from your perspective, you know,
Aria.
and just this idea of corporate soul healing. What could you leave us with in terms of an inspirational thought on that?
Before David sings, I just tell you, we string players, we try whole life to get any close to human voice, and we always know it is not possible. Human voice is the ultimate instrument. Please sing us just few bars at least, David.
Well, I will, because I'm just going back. I sometimes sing in the boardroom just because it just really, because they're bored in there. That's probably what I call it. But it gets underneath gets underneath again, the rib cage. Okay, I'll sing it. I mean, I've been learning a little song. There's great art and then there's great sentiment. And there's a song that I'll just sing you the first phrase of it. And this is why inside I'm Italian. And basically all he's saying is it's dawn. Okay, but this is how, if you're Italian, this is how you say it's dawn. You don't do it with an SMS or an email. You do it this way. L'alba separa dalla luce l'ombra e la mia volontà dal mio desiderio. O dolci stelle, è l'ora di morir, un più divino amor dal ciel vi sgombra.
Bravo!
That was beautiful.
I think I don't know if you heard that, but basically, I think that the best businesses should sound like that inside. You should crack them open and you should hear. And I think that's true of humans. You know, the word company means with bread. It was originally a place that friends got together to break bread. And the best companies, the ones that Miha and I work with that are functioning the best, are the ones that, especially in this period, are remembering the family feel, the amicizia, the soul, essentially. And so you don't have to sing, but then, you know, find the business equivalent of that, and you'll be okay.
Oh, that's just beautiful. I mean, really, to really cap off the idea of corporate soul healing or just soul healing, it is a period of time where we all need it. And thank you both. It has been a gift to have this time with both of you, and I look forward to sharing this within my communities, and just look forward to hearing more from you and seeing more of you in the future. Thank you so much.
Likewise.